All right, welcome to Halitics. So glad to be talking to you today in the afternoon, a little bit later start. I wasn't going to talk about that, but somehow it got into my mind. Yeah, starting a little bit late, had some appointments I had to do this morning, but everything taken care of. And I've got you for maybe an hour, maybe a little less. I'm not quite sure. Kind of will depend, I think, if I get calls. I've got some topics. I think they're good ones. They're not real, changes from the usual. I kind of say play the same song a lot, but hopefully in different notes so that there's always something a little bit different, a little bit new in what I present. I do ask you, please do subscribe, click like, click subscribe, tell your friends, tell family, anyone you know that you think might enjoy what I'm doing here, please ask them to tune in to Halitics. Share the links, share the Facebook page. It's a really good place, I think, to kind of wade into Halitics a little bit. You certainly see a diversity of viewpoints, whereas when you watch my live stream, unless I get some calls, or depending on who my guests are, if they're guests, you get my view. In Halitics on Facebook, you get a lot of different views. I'm also considering at some point maybe we'll get back into the blogosphere where I actually share my views in writing online. Haven't gotten quite there yet. Couple of topics, 3 topics, I guess. Well, there two are very closely related. Alexei Navalny, I don't know what do you want to call him, pro-democracy Russian activist who was recently killed, found dead, however you want to put it, in an Arctic prison where the Putin regime had put him. And I know some people, I think Aaron Mate questioned whether Putin was responsible for his death. I mean, I guess maybe not. I mean, maybe, who was the guy who had the pedo island, the friend of the president's and Prince, was it Andrew? Jeffrey Epstein. Maybe Jeffrey Epstein's death was totally natural and all those guards fell asleep just opportunely when he got a chance to hang himself. Maybe it's possible. And I guess it's also possible, as our friend Aaron Mate says, that Putin really had nothing to do with the death of Navalny. I'd say the odds are against it, but you never know. And look, I love Aaron. I'm not trying to say this to mock Aaron. What I'm saying is there's no perfect source. There's no always reliable source. Maybe Aaron's right. Maybe it wasn't Putin, but it sure kind of seems like it. And Putin's political enemies do have a pretty regular habit of turning up dead. So I'm going to say, yeah, it was probably Putin. Now, of course, I am the one who says we shouldn't be fighting Putin. We shouldn't be at war. We shouldn't be fighting this proxy war with Ukraine. Yeah, he's a really bad guy. There's lots of bad people in the world. There's lots of thugs in the world. There are lots of tyrants in this world. And we can't be fighting all of them. We can't be trying to go to war with all of them. We have to figure out how we can make life better for people in our country and around the world, but at a reasonable cost, at one that doesn't lead to tens of thousands, or in the case of the Ukraine proxy war, hundreds of thousands of dead, and will likely lead, unless we sue for peace now, will lead to even more dead. I don't think Navalny, for all his anti-Putin rhetoric, he wasn't for this endless war. He opposed Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but he never called on the West to support Ukraine with billions and billions of dollars of aid, as far as I could tell. He just wanted this war to end, and I think what he would have wanted, he's dead. We'll never know. As far as I know, he never said, but my guess is he would have wanted us to be suing for peace. I find it very disappointing, very disheartening that a lot of progressives don't share this view, and I don't really understand why. I really don't. I guess they buy into this idea that we've got to show Putin. We've got to stand up to Putin. It's a choice between either you give Putin everything he wants or you don't. And it's not, right? It's not. In fact, what's benefited Putin is this long slog, this endless war. He's been able to crack down even more aggressively on political opponents. He's been able to seize more control over the Russian state, much as Bibi Netanyahu, despite the unpopularity in Israel of the war against Gaza. And really, it's just a war on Gazans, right? I mean, that's basically what it is. It's not a war between armies. It's not a war between states. It's a war by Israel on the people of Gaza. That has not made Bibi popular, but it has allowed him to consolidate his power. It's kind of the same thing in Russia, although as I understand it, we don't really know. It's very hard to know what the view is of the Russian street, the Russian populace. This war is not unpopular in Russia, in Moscow. It's not strongly opposed, except maybe by the families of those who are fighting in it. So there you go. There's the quick topics: Navalny and fascism, Yale and standardized tests. And I talk about standardized tests. I think it's important. I think it's important we look at the state of education today in America, because I think a lot of the wars that are being fought between identity groups, between political groups on the left and right over who gets access to the university, who gets to be in to be part of the academy, is because of the remarkable advantages you get if you go to an Ivy League school, how your life is very likely going to be a lot better than if you didn't. And so people are fighting over those scarce spots. I think we've lost sight, in my view, because of that, because of the economic value that an Ivy League degree or the degree from a top academic institution provides, the economic advantages that it provides, have caused us to lose sight of what I believe should be the role of the academy in a democracy. And it's not to be kind of a clearinghouse for corporate America, for top law firms, to kind of weed out the draw so that the gold will rise or the cream will rise to the top in these schools, and therefore they can be selected. The people at the top can be selected, plucked, if you will, by Google, by top law firms and the like, by the State Department, to be the future elites. That is not what I believe the academy's role should be, but it's kind of what it's evolved into, and we have to address that and deal with it. But the way we should be dealing with it is not by ensuring that there is, DEI at these institutions. It's by reducing their influence, their power, and the power of anybody, of any one group of people in our society. Let's start, though, with Alexei Navalny. And so Brother Cornel West, I call him brother because he seems to call everyone else brother, and getting a lot of shade for calling people brother, but also for this tweet in particular. When I say shade, he's getting this from the progressive community, the liberal, the left community. I want to say liberal, that has endorsed him, that has embraced him, and maybe now no longer is endorsing him either in his run for president or as a public scholar, because he is being perceived now as somewhat of an establishment stooge, as somebody who's naive, who doesn't really understand or doesn't care about power imbalances to the degree he should in America, and is also trying, I guess, to make nicey nice with elites. And for that, he's getting a lot of criticism. We'll play a clip from one of my favorite, and I, use the word advisedly. It is one of my favorites, but I don't love my favorites so much anymore. I really used to like Jimmy Dore very, very much, and also Breonna Joy Gray, perhaps even more. Jimmy's no longer a favorite. He's no longer he's no longer on my list because of his bizarre embrace of conspiracy theories regarding the climate Holocaust, believing somehow that he's embraced the conspiracy theories presented by the real conspiracy, the conspiracy of the oil and gas and fossil fuel industry, which has conspired against us, against the planet, for at least 50, 60, 100, 120 years, well, however long you want to go back, 200 years, 300 years in the UK with the coal industry back then. So for whatever reason, Jimmy has embraced what they're presenting, what they're selling. So I can't promote his his live stream. Still really like Brianna Joy Gray. And I generally really like the RBN guys, or now they call themselves, I think, Revolutionary Blackout or Revolutionary Black Network. They don't like this tweet. And the reason they don't like it is because Cornel West in it conflates, he equates to a very significant degree Alexei Navalny with freedom fighters in America, including Mumia Abu Jamal, who I believe was wrongly imprisoned for decades for a murder he didn't commit. Leonard Peltier, well-known Native American activist who also was a freedom fighter, who was also, I believe, killed at Wounded Knee. I could have some of this wrong, so please forgive me. Please be not patient. Please indulge my ignorance if I have, to the extent I have it on these issues. The guys at Revolutionary Blackout Network don't like that he is equating Navalny with some of these other folks. And frankly, I think they're wrong. I mean, I'm not a huge fan right now of Dr. West. I think he made a terrible mistake leaving the Green Party. And so does RBN. But I think it's okay to show your concern for Navalny. He was standing up to a tyrant. He was brave. Whatever else, even Aaron Monte criticizing to a degree Navalny, saying he really wasn't that progressive. And I accept that. I said, he was not a Western stooge. He was not a pro-West stooge, as some on the left are insisting. But neither was he some kind of an idealist in the mode of, and I said naive idealist, which was probably unfair. I said he's not a naive idealist. Neither, for that matter, was Dr. King. But Dr. King was a true idealist. He believed in the power of the ideal, that we should be striving towards a truly just society. And I don't think that was exactly Alexei Navalny either. It was Dr. King. It wasn't Alexei Navalny, but Alexei Navalny was, fighting against tyranny in his country, and bravely so. And he paid the ultimate price, at least, unless maybe Aaron Monte could be right and it wasn't a murder by Putin. But I think most of us are like, yeah, no, it was Putin. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to go with that. I mean, it's just, except my subscribe button was over my oval blue Halitics, so I apologize for that. Let's just go right to CJ here, and he's going to talk a little bit about Dr. West.
At class, here's another thing that was a spot-on critique made by, and I'm just kind of going through my notes. Some of this is a going over a point. But the point that Nick and Misty make, or I think Nick makes it specifically when he's saying he's being weak on Nazism in order to stay in or to fit in with his social class.
All right, so let me stop it right there. So what they're doing there, what CJ is doing there, is saying Dr. West is being weak on Nazism because he identifies Alexei Navalny as a freedom fighter, as somebody who is in the same class as a Mumia Abu Jamal or a Leonard Peltier. And so CJ saying, no, Navalny's a Nazi is what CJ is saying, or he's saying that's what Nick said, that's what Misty said, is that somehow Dr. West, by praising Navalny, is really, he's praising the worst kind of person, a Nazi. And just let me zoom in on this. This is from that broadcast with CJ. My prayers are with the precious family of the courageous Russian political prisoner, the late Alexei Navalny. And I showed you that before. He has the picture. You can see the bottom of it there. If you are going to argue that Dr. West is praising, platforming, whatever, a dead Nazi, then you're really saying this is really awful, that Dr. West is doing something very, very, very wrong and bad. And I think that's just over the top. That's just not justified by the record. I think this is a problem. This is more siloing, right? This is more where our progressive media, our left media, because I don't know that CJ and Nick from RBON or RBN, Revolutionary Blackout Network, I don't know that they'd want to be called progressive. I don't think they would accept that moniker progressive. But they're siloing themselves in this sense. Because Cornel West is praising, and Cornel West has gotten a lot wrong. I'm not going to say he's perfect by any means. He said you had to vote for Joe Biden because the political establishment, the duopoly, gave us Trump and they gave us Biden. You have no choice but to vote for Biden. Well, I think he was wrong there. I think there were alternatives in that election. I don't agree with that. And I think that RBN was right to call out West for that comment. But the real reason I think we see this from RBN, and we saw the same from Jimmy when it comes to the climate holocaust, is that they are reacting to anything that they consider, that they view as a corporatist or establishment viewpoint. Now, the climate holocaust is not a corporate viewpoint. It's simply an academic viewpoint. It's a scientific viewpoint. It's the consensus among all who have studied the issue and who aren't compromised by fossil fuel industry greed, or who aren't charlatans, hucksters, and the like, the Rush Limbaughs of the world. So the climate holocaust is not something that is a theory that the corporatists have created to distract from their own misdeeds or to line their own pockets. In fact, it's just the opposite. I mean, a good example of a hoax that elites have perpetrated for their own benefit is the Russiagate hoax, right? I mean, the Hillary Clinton campaign, a group of elites, very powerful, very rich people, didn't want to accept, refused to acknowledge that the reason they lost is because they weren't pro-worker, they weren't pro-people, they weren't pro-poor. They didn't want to say, well, that's why we lost. The Democrats need to embrace a truly democratic view and democratic values. They didn't want to acknowledge that, so they created this idea that Russia somehow elected Donald Trump. That way they get to avoid reckoning with the failures of the Democratic Party. And that, of course, benefits the establishment in all sorts of ways. It means both parties are corporate. Neither party is on the side of you. So for that reason, it's understandable. It's true. The establishment gets an awful lot wrong. And it's not just the Democratic Party elites that embrace the Russia conspiracy gate nonsense. It's the newspapers associated with the Democratic Party, like the New York Times, which frankly is the newspaper of the elites. It's many top academic institutions. Columbia University hired Hillary Clinton. The Clintons are associated with these institutions, as are the Obamas. So I understand why CJ and RBN would react against Alexei Navalny, because he seems to be a darling now, especially in death, of elites. But that doesn't make him a Nazi. There is some argument, evidence that he is. I'll get to that in just a moment, or that he was, or that he embraced right-wing or fascistic views. But the fact that the establishment ultimately is embracing him in his death doesn't mean he was a pro-Western stooge. He wasn't. A little more from CJ, and then we'll get to some other topic, some more on this topic.
This, to me, illustrates the issue with teaming, with having broad sort of coalitions with these lefties in the professional managerial class that has proven they are willing to side with the establishment on certain things. You saw Cornel West just the last time siding with Russiagate, siding with the ending of democracy, siding with this ridiculous assessment that Trump is the one that's ending democracy. So he openly acknowledges that he buys their narratives on a lot of things.
So you can see exactly what I'm saying is this is how we're siloing ourselves, how our media is only speaking to people who already have, by hook, line, and sinker what we're selling from a particular ideological vantage point. And the establishment media does get an awful lot wrong, and for bad reasons, because they're corrupt, because they're in bed with the political elites and the mic, but they also get a lot right, frankly. And even right-wing media gets things right. Washington Examiner had an excellent piece on the death of Middle America, which I used yesterday in my stream. So we can't do this. We shouldn't do what CJ is doing, which is saying, okay, Dr. West, you've embraced things that Barack Obama said. You accepted the argument that you can't vote for Biden because Trump is so evil. And therefore, I'm rejecting you. Therefore, I'm rejecting you. Therefore, I'm rejecting your tweet. Therefore, I'm going to poke a hole in your tweet about Navalny. And I just don't think it's that simple. It's not, you just can't just completely reject what somebody says or assume or attribute it to some type of corruption or bad faith, or just simply say it's false because they've gotten things wrong in the past. Even if they've gotten things wrong in the past for bad reasons. Look, the New York Times has gotten a lot wrong in the past and for bad reasons. But that doesn't mean every single thing they say is wrong. I am mad at Jimmy Dore. I no longer subscribe to Jimmy Dore. He's totally wrong about the climate holocaust. The climate holocaust is real. The climate holocaust is not a hoax. The climate holocaust is not some figment of Elon Musk's imagination so that you'll buy Teslas. Jimmy's 100% wrong. He couldn't be more wrong. Greta Thunberg is a hero. For him to mock her, for him to, kind of point out that she has some learning differences is reprehensible. It's really, really bad. But that doesn't mean and I'm not subscribed, that doesn't mean I'm not going to take seriously some things he says, because he has a track record of getting things right as well. And frankly, Dr. West does too. So I think CJ is just misguided here. And I think this is what we have to stop doing, all of us. The Trump haters out there, just because Trump said it doesn't make it false. Trump's gotten some things right. The Trump haters, the Hillary team wants you to do exactly what CJ's doing there, which is completely rejecting Cornel West. Team Hillary wants you to say, okay, anything that Donald Trump says has to be wrong. The reason they want you to say this, well, Donald Trump supports better trade policies that protect American workers. Team Hillary doesn't want that. So if Trump said it, if you say, well, we need to protect American jobs with tariffs. Team Hillary, all they have to do is say, what are you, Donald Trump? Who are you, Donald Trump? And then you're silenced. You're canceled for that, right? So that's the benefit to Team Hillary. When I say Team Hillary, I mean the establishment elites, the corporatists, the people at Goldman Sachs who paid her hundreds of thousands of dollars for a 60-minute boring speech. You say, hey, I want us to stop killing people, or I want us to stop supporting the killing of people in Ukraine. And Team Hillary just says, hey, what are you, Donald Trump? He says he wants the killing to stop. Is that who you are? You want the killing to stop? You're Donald Trump? So that benefits Team Hillary, the weapons manufacturers, because they'll shut you up, they'll cancel you, people will look at you askance, will look at you side-eyed, and they'll get to keep sending billions of dollars of weaponry for more deaths in Ukraine. We got to stop doing this. We've got to stop siloing ourselves where if we're in a certain place, on a certain team, then everyone on our team is always right and everyone on the other team is always wrong. Because first of all, we don't even know who's always on our team. It's like people say, oh, it's AOC. She must be right. No. But there are others who would say, including I think CJ and at RBN and maybe not Brianna Joy Gray, but certainly Jimmy Dore would say, oh, it's AOC. Well, she's got to be wrong. No. Sometimes she's right. Sometimes she's wrong. She's wrong a lot more than her supporters would have you believe, but she's also right more often than her detractors would have you believe. All right, 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. 240-242-5646. So basically what I'm saying, I got to not scratch my ear. I got an infection because of that. So what the Navalny detractors are saying is, okay, he's a fascist. He's a pro-Western stooge. The reason, this is something that Aaron Monnet said, and I don't have the clip. I could get it, I just didn't save it, was that the reason he's getting a lot of attention now and he's being described and presented as a democracy hero, a martyr, a Putin martyr, is because he was pro-West, because he embraced policies that the West really liked. And that's just not completely true. It's sort of true. It's true that the West liked the fact that he exposed Putin for a bad guy. And Putin is a bad guy. I mean, he is. Does that mean we should be going to war with him? No, we shouldn't be. And in fact, the war is empowering him. But in the end, Alexei Navalny was a brave man who got a lot right and got a lot of stuff kind of wrong as well. And that's okay. We all got things wrong. This is from Foreign Affairs, which I think is now a Politico. I may be right about that. It says Foreign Affairs on it, but I got this through the Politico website, so I'm assuming that they, and I should look this up, right? I guess I really should look this up. I'm going to assume that Politico took over Foreign Affairs. Yeah, don't forget, click subscribe, click and chime that bell. He never wanted to be a dissident. What he wanted to be is a politician. What he wanted to be was the president of Russia, which he'll never be, obviously. So didn't want to be a dissident. And that's why, despite all his crusades, this is from the article in Foreign Affairs, crusading against corruption and against Putin, he wanted to be a man of the people and a future president of Russia. And I think this is a great article because it really explains everything about Navalny. You know, when you say, well, he was really paid off by the West, or he was a neo-Nazi. His record doesn't really support those. You can pick and choose little things about what he did here or there and say, oh, well, he's a Nazi or he's a Western stooge. But really, if you look through his record, not at all. What he was is somebody who, like a lot of politicians, is a bit of a shapeshifter, takes positions that they think will help them get more popular, get more votes, win elections. The problem for Navalny is there aren't any fair elections in Russia, and there haven't been for 30 years. So he's not going to win any elections because Vladimir Putin wins all the elections. So why do I say that these are the way that CJ there from RBN calls him a neo-Nazi or Nazi and attacks Dr. West and Comey? Why do I say they're clearly they don't stack up to reality? And why do I waste our time with this stuff? Because again, it goes back to we have to be skeptical about anyone who tells us anything. We have to try to look at, is this true or isn't it true? Does this make sense or does it not? And in the end, we don't have time. No one. I have time to do this because this is what I do, and I could be wrong. Don't trust me necessarily either. In the end, I think what we have to do is kind of live our values more even than our facts. Who running for office really believes and is supportive of, will fight for Medicare for all? Ultimately, there's a question we have to ask ourselves. Not, well, what do they think about Alexei Navalny? Because we don't really know. We don't even know whether we should believe Alexei Navalny. But what we do know is that media is going to spin. Media is going to present its own take. The people who are spinning have their own parochial interests, their own self-interest. We can, though, recognize there are certain verities. And I don't think there's any question. Everyone should have health care. our healthcare system is awful. We shouldn't be in endless war. It leads to lots of deaths and costs a tremendous amount of money. It's really, really, really bad. And since the media can't be trusted, when they try to persuade us, cajole us that we should be fighting or we should be providing endless supplies of weaponry to Ukraine, maybe we realize that's a load of crap. Because these are the same people that told us, that tell us we have to support Israel. And when we can make decisions that are, relatively informed and relatively intelligent and in our best interest, let's make them. Like, let's vote for candidates if they support Medicare for all, Dr. Jill Stein, and not if they don't, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. All right, so Putin's invasion of Ukraine forced Navalny to take up a strong anti-war position, which made him less popular in Russia, and obviously ultimately probably led to his death, his being killed in some gulag in the Arctic. And even though it hurt him in Russia, it didn't really help him in Ukraine, which to me proves the point. He's not a pro-Western stooge. He's not a neocon. He's not a neo-Nazi. Remember, the neo-Nazis in this war are fighting on the side of Ukraine, the Azov Battalion. We know a lot of the little ribbons and clusters that some of the soldiers in the Ukrainian army wear have neo-Nazi connotations. But they're not on that group. That crew isn't fans of Navalny either. So Navalny is not on the side of the neo-Nazis. He's not all in for Russia's war. He's not a fascist. He's a politician. He's a politician who, in this case, he couldn't really agree with Putin. And he knew it was wrong. It is wrong. But he's taking a position that doesn't help him in the long run. But it also pretty strongly proves he's not what his most outspoken critics on the left in the West claim, that he's some kind of a fascist or tyrant. And the argument also that he's a fascist or he's totally in the bag for the West, which, you say, well, those are two, how can they be the same? Well, the fascists in this war, Ukraine versus Russia, are on the side of Ukraine, which is the Western side. But he never was like all in for Ukraine. He said, hey, Crimea is Russian. He says to the Ukrainians, don't deceive yourselves. It's going to be part of Russia. Don't fight some war to try to get Ukraine back like we're fighting now. Don't do it. And if you say, well, how? Ukraine didn't start this war to get Ukraine back. Russia started. There was a lot of shooting on both sides. There was a lot of provocations on both sides, probably. And the provocations from the Ukraine side were by the neo-Nazis. And Navalny, showing he's not a neo-Nazi, said to them, don't do it. Don't start a fight you're not going to finish. He was a realist. He is a realist. He's right. This war's been a disaster for Russia and for Ukraine, and a country he was close to. So I don't get where CJ is so upset with Navalny. It doesn't make sense. I mean, not with, critical of Navalny, but so upset with Cornel West, Dr. West, for kind of sort of championing him. So is it fair? This is from the New Yorker. Is he an ultra? If he's not a fascist, is he an ultranationalist? He is very pro-Russia. He does have a history of making some very pro-Russia or I don't know what you want to call it, xenophobic, Russophile statements, which isn't fascist exactly. It's not Nazis, because the Nazis and the Russians are dead red enemies. But, he did come out back 15, 20 years ago for gun rights. He called for deporting migrants from Russia. Sort of sounds like Trump. Not a great guy. Not back then, anyway. Okay, he's not an idealist. He's a politician, and not a great politician in certain ways. But it's a long time ago. I mean, ultimately, you know, people. Dr. King did some things that we don't like. In the end, his legacy is one of the, you know, on the short list of the greatest Americans of all time, is because he fought against evil. He fought against a terrible system, an oppressive system. First, on behalf of African Americans, especially, who were clearly suffering, being degraded in the South, but throughout the country, demanding, insisting on civil rights, and winning that battle to a very significant extent, and then broadening his movement, never forgetting the plight of Black Americans, but broadening to include poor Americans, to stop our warmongering. So maybe, yes, there are things in Dr. King's record that aren't admirable, but in the end, because of what he did, his defining fight was for justice. And I'm not going to say Navalny is some kind of a paragon of virtue by any means. I'm not comparing him to Dr. King. He's not Dr. King. But he was fighting a bad guy, a tyrant, Vladimir Putin. And he gets credit for that in my book. He shouldn't be reviled, or we shouldn't be looking too, you know, yes, look at his record. But does every single stone have to be unturned? Or do you say at some point, okay, he was fighting a good fight, and for the right reasons, and to benefit the people of Russia, which, by the way, is not what we're doing in Ukraine. We're not benefiting anybody by it. We're making it worse for everybody. But, you know, Navalny's record, far from perfect, and he marched with, apparently in some rallies, they call it the Russian marches, which was for, you know, sort of a nationalistic thing, and there were apparently some neo-Nazis in those Russian marches, which I find very strange, because the Nazi movement was so Slavophobic, anti-Slavic, kind of weird. But he did participate in this demonstration in Moscow, where there were ultranationalists. So it's a bad thing. He supported some of Putin's wars against Georgia. Not ideal. All right. So what we learn from this is that the newspapers, the liberal elites, the Guardian and the like, who are extolling Navalny as some sort of wonderful, great leader, are missing part of the picture too. Big surprise. Surprise, surprise. I wouldn't bash Cornel West for saying, okay, a guy who stood up to Putin, who took the risk, which ultimately cost him his life, to go back to Russia. I ain't going to bash that guy. Just not going to do it. I'll tell you who I do bash. I'm an American. I look in my country. I demand better from my country. I'm Jewish. I demand better from my people. We, America, should not be fomenting more killing in Moscow, by Moscow in Ukraine. We should be moving really heaven and earth to end the killing. So I like this guy, Leonid Rogozin. I read some more of his pieces. He seems pretty solid, seems to have a good foundation for what he writes. This is in the wake of the Tucker Carlson interview. Carlson got a lot of criticism. Putin is ready for talks on Ukraine, but on his own terms. Okay, well, let's take him up on it. He's ready to talk. Let's talk. And although Rogozin says it's on Putin's terms, Putin's not saying, I won't talk to you if you don't give me what I want. Putin's saying, or Rogozin saying, Putin will only ultimately agree to peace if he gets certain things. But he's willing to talk, but if he doesn't get what he wants, there's no peace. Well, I think that's what we need to do. Let's go and talk to Putin. We don't say you have to do this and you have to give us that. And if you don't concede right now, beforehand, or we don't talk. No, we can go in with certain ideas. I mean, one thing I think is non-negotiable is Kiev remains independent. Ukraine remains a separate sovereign state with the self-determination of the Ukrainian people. When you talk about territory, yeah, you want a lot of territory, Putin. A lot of people would have to die for us to get it back, and we might not get it back. So let's figure out what we do with that. You probably don't want to control lands that are filled with Ukrainian separatists. So let's figure out ways to either have a buffer zone, demilitarized zone, whatever. That's what you talk about with Putin. Here's what Rogozin says, and I think all this, and Rogozin's no Putin fan, trust me. Rogozin's not like some kind of a Russian apologist or stooge or anything like that. He's just like, hey, this is what the president of Russia said. I believe him. Let's figure out what we can do to end the killing. And I don't know why that's arguable. I don't know why is that even controversial. I have huge people say, oh, you would give Putin everything he wants. I'm like, I want people not to die. Okay, that's what I want. I don't want us to spend billions of dollars, which will only lead to more land being laid waste and more soldiers killed and more spouses crying and more children orphaned. That's what I want. Putin's endgame appears to be along the lines of what he had thought he was going to get in Istanbul 2 years ago when there were negotiations then, which basically was what I'm saying now. There's a buffer zone, you keep Crimea, but Ukraine remains independent, which is basically what seems to me reasonable, actually, to be perfectly honest with you. And also no NATO, right? No NATO in Ukraine. But Putin is saying, hey, if you don't give me that, then the war will continue. And Ukraine's going to lose more territory and lives and infrastructure, which is basically falling apart anyway, if it keeps being stubborn. Now, I don't like that should Ukraine keep being stubborn. I feel like it's the U.S. that is pushing Zelensky to stay stubborn. And if the U.S., along with India and China, were pressuring Putin and Zelensky to have a deal, they would make a deal. So I'm not thrilled with that well, that's what Putin's thought is. You're being stubborn. You're fighting me when you shouldn't be. I don't really think it's well, Ukraine's certainly part of it. But it's the U.S. tail that's wagging the Ukraine dog right now. And Rogozin goes on to say, and again, I don't see how this isn't kind of self-evident. This is why I like it, because I think what he's saying is pretty much clear, true. I don't know how it's really arguable. So what Rogozin says here is that Putin wants the West to recognize, and I don't know why we don't recognize it, the cost of resisting this aggression. The continued support for Ukraine's military costs thousands of lives and devastate Ukraine even further. Obviously, it's going to cost us money. And success is hardly guaranteed. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, did the offensive that everyone talked about, the vaunted summer 23 offensive work? No. Can we please talk? Can we please put this all? Can we end this war? Can we end the killing? Navalny wanted Putin gone. But he didn't want us to be fighting endless war in Ukraine either. And that's why I have a problem those who condemn Cornel West for praising Navalny. Navalny was trying to end the reign of a tyrant, but he also was realistic about it. And he wasn't siding with the Western NATO alliance. Seems to me that's pretty reasonable, pretty much correct, pretty much of an accurate, somewhat of a middle ground position. And so the criticism of West is unfair, and perhaps the praise of Navalny is a bit over the top. But again, Rogozin's spot on. The war's going very badly. I quoted from New York Times. One more time, I guess I can just show it real quick. Might as well. Ukraine, at best, is fighting a holding. Will be in a holding pattern. Be able to hold the existing front lines. That's assuming they keep getting our weapons. Without our weapons, they're going to lose. So what do? You don't want stalemate. You don't want endless war. You don't want Ukraine to fall. So here's the answer. Negotiate with Putin. He doesn't want Ukraine. He wants a buffer zone. He wants to be protected from NATO. Reasonable. Realistic. Do it. Period. Wanted to talk about my little sort of mad I don't have my headline. Okay, so Yale is not going to use standardized tests anymore. Oh no, I got it wrong. Yale is going back to standardized tests to a degree, but they're going to allow you to submit different kinds. You don't have to submit SATs. You can use the ACT. You can use your what do they call it again? Those when you like AP courses or subject tests. I mean, that's fine. Whatever. I'm against that. I think I'm against not requiring SATs is what I think. I think there should be one standard test that everyone takes. That's what I think. And here's what let me just give you the headline real quick so you can see it. Because I think at some point for these academic powerhouses, stalwarts, whatever you want to call it, or even, the more modest schools, there should be some way. It shouldn't be determinative necessarily how you do on a test, but they need to be able to put everyone at least at some point on an equal footing, on the same playing field. And nothing does that unless everyone takes the same test. GPA doesn't do it because some people are going to more competitive high schools than others. Some take tougher courses than others. Some have tougher teachers than others. You can't account for all of that. A school can't account for all that no matter what. But if everyone takes the same test, well, you in Europe, you take the baccalaureate, you pass it, you do really well in the baccalaureate in France, you go to the Sorbonne. You don't do as well, you maybe go to a regional university. Or maybe you don't go to university, you go to vocational school. And you know what? It's not the end of the world if you have a just society. If you have a society where, okay, you didn't get into college, you're still going to have health care. You're still going to make a decent living. You're still going to have a pension and a secure retirement. And if you do go to the top school in the country, or one of the top schools like Yale is, you're not going to get that much richer than everyone else. You're not going to live. Maybe you have to go to slightly better restaurants. Maybe your house a little bigger, but you have 5 houses. That's how we address this crisis, which is such fighting, infighting, group fighting, outgroups fighting Asians, fighting with Black Americans, fighting with Latino Americans, fighting with working class white Americans, all fighting because there's only a few spots at each of these schools and they all want those spots for their identity group. But the way you get around that is those spots aren't that valuable. The reason people fight for them is because they're really good spots. They're really worth a lot. What they should be worth a lot to are people who are academic powerhouses, people who demonstrate that they really, really care about learning, about pedagogy, about academia, That's what those, but they're not. They're not, unfortunately. They're, okay, I want to get a job working for McKinsey so I can help corporations slim down, offshore, take over competitors. I want to get into Harvard Law School so I can work for a corporate law firm and make, get millions annually as a partner because I'm helping corporations fight unionization. That's why these schools are so popular. That's why there's such demand for the limited spots. Because if you get in, you're much more likely to get rich. That's the dynamic we have to change. And the way we change it is not through the school. It shouldn't be the school's response. Schools should not be responsible for solving social problems in America. You can see why Yale made this call. It's not for the right reason. So Dartmouth, obviously another Ivy League school, found that hundreds of students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who had solid scores in the 1400 range. By the way, let me just digress here. So when I was in high school, a 1400 on your SAT was really, really, really good. Now, I knew very few people who got scores that high. It's changed. They keep making the test easier and easier to score high on. For whatever that's worth. I don't know that it matters, but it's true. But nobody who had 1400s wouldn't submit their scores back then. Yale says, wait a sec, we're trying to have this, we're doing DEI. We're diverse, we're equitable, we're inclusive. We need to have not just rich, white, presumably, or really Asian, because it's not the lower socioeconomic background necessarily. It's people from certain identifiable ethnic groups, racial groups. Otherwise, the Ivy League, Cal was like 45% Asian. And many of those Asian Americans are from poorer backgrounds. Harvard was, I think, at one point 40% Jewish in the 30s, 40s. And many of those Jewish people were not rich. So it wasn't a question of socioeconomics. It was a question of one identifiable ethnic group outperforming other groups and therefore becoming, predominant, or certainly, if not predominant, becoming the plurality group in the school. And the Ivies don't like that. They don't want that. They want diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're trying to make remake society in what they view as some sort of woke image. That shouldn't be their job. Their job should be to educate the best and the brightest. That's their job. That's their role. That's their responsibility. But because society has become so unfair, so unjust, so inequitable, so unequal, the Ivies and other top schools, other state schools are trying to kind of address that, but they're not succeeding. Because ultimately, admitting more African Americans doesn't make America a better place. America is a bad place because there are people sleeping under bridges and begging in the streets. And because some people are flying around in private jets and burning, more fossil fuels, more carbon than half the country combined is. And having a few more CEOs who are black or brown or women doesn't change that in any way. The way we change that is with smart tax policy, with smart jobs policy, with the right incentives. And none of that is the responsibility of the Ivy League or other top schools. Their responsibility is to educate the best and the brightest and, come up with solutions that really will make America a better place, a fairer place, a juster place for everyone. Not just lead to a few more people, more diverse graduating class. I don't think we can get there because the people who are in those graduating classes, they're already at the top. Things are going well for them. They don't want, in the end, a juster, fairer, better society. They want what they think is coming to them. And everyone else is on their own. But, this is the right thing. They may be doing it for the wrong reason. They thought that it was going to lead to more diversity, equity, and inclusion. It didn't. So they're not, and it's hurting their, and clearly they're not getting the best students because they've dropped this requirement for the SATs. For example, MIT, even more competitive than the Ivies, certainly when it comes to engineering and STEM, they're going back to the SAT. Why? As a Yale spokesperson said, the students with higher scores are the ones who have the higher GPAs, who do better in our classes. And test scores are the best predictor of a student's performance in Yale courses, better than anything else. And why is that? Well, because it's the one fair marker. It's a level playing field. Everyone takes the same test. That's what the university should be aspiring to. Admitting the students who get the best, who would do best in their classes, who would learn the most, who would be able to use their degree and use their education most effectively, most successfully. Not make the most money, not help elites tighten their stranglehold on our society, but who will learn the most and use their education best. The way we get there is having a fair society, just society, not Ivy League presidents deciding on their own how they can socially engineer the future. All right, I'll be back tomorrow for the free-for-all. I guess this program went on pretty long. I don't know how long have I been on. Let me look. My thing tells me. My little recording. It may. I think I have to look at my actual stream online, which I don't want to do right now. Last point, yes, please. I'll say it again because I subscribe, man. And woman, whoever you are, I don't care. Whatever your gender, sex, doesn't matter, race, ethnicity, just please subscribe. And I will be back tomorrow again for the free for all.